everybody. Before I begin, I have to tell you that I have the great privilege of going around the world. I've worked with leaders of large companies and small companies. I've gotten to know Tim Hudak over the years. I wish he was running for government. You're lucky to have somebody that's got his humility, his will, his personality, his intelligence manning the rudder of this association. Tim, thanks for having me. So, in the next 45 minutes, I want to go on an adventure. I want to get you out of this room. I want to get you out of the present. I want to get your minds away from the deals that you're doing. I want to get you to put the screens aside, because together we're going to uncover one of the most powerful communication platforms known to human beings. It's a platform so powerful and versatile that not only are you going to discover today, you're going to learn how to master it. It's going to build your business. It's going to improve your relationship with your clients. It's going to allow you to disrupt the disruptors that want to take away your business. If I'm going to join you on this quest, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I found my calling at a very young age. First job. I had a briefcase with my initials on it. I got to sell for a local radio station in Montreal, the West Island. I loved this job. I had my briefcase packed with everything about that radio station, the DJs, their pictures, I had posters, I had all the information and all the ratings. I remember one morning driving up St. John's Boulevard, Pierrefonds. I see this sign, opening soon, a restaurant. What an opportunity for a cold call. I pull in. I walk in, and if anybody's ever sold real estate into the restaurant business, 2 weeks before our opening, it's just carnage. It looks like it'll never get done. I wade through the equipment and the people running around. I find the owners. I give them my best pitch, and they say, we don't have any money for advertising. We are all in. All our chips are on the table. We're taking our grandmother's rib recipe, and we're staking our future on it. So I'm walking to the door. I'm dejected, and just before I get out the door, I hear, hey, kid, are you hungry? I turn around. They said, we're just bringing out a test plate of ribs. Love to see what you think of them. Oh, man, these were among the best ribs I ever had. Next day, I happened to show up at pretty well the same time, and I got their southern chicken and biscuits and gravy. And by day 3, I'd built enough of a relationship by convincing them to buy a $300 summer safety radio advertising package, 15 30-second ads, 15 bumpers on safety tips. I was all in. I made sure it was the best ads, the best announcer, convinced and conned my way into getting the best drive time. I show up opening night. I walk in. Not a soul is there. The husband, the wife, a few friends, a couple of angel investors. Then I hear the door open. And I hear it open again. And before you know it, this place was slammed. It was jammed. I was busking tables, doing anything I could to help out. And more than once, I asked this question, how did you hear about it? They said, we heard about it on the radio. And I realized I'd found a purpose, connecting buyers and sellers together. But the next 30 years, I built 2 advertising agencies, a research firm, and 5 years ago I sold all of it so I could speak my mind in the media and at conferences like this. Through my entire career, from the radio station to today, there's one word that matters to all of us. In fact, it is the oxygen of all human endeavor. It is the lifeblood of sales. And that word is attention. See, when you have attention, you breathe opportunity. You can inspire, you can motivate, you can educate, you can excite. An actor can make you laugh. When you have attention as a salesperson, you can engage your client's head, heart, and hands, how they think, they feel, and they behave. The challenge nowadays is the headwinds. It's so hard to get attention. We're living in this age of noise where too much and too many is chasing a finite amount of time. We're asking humans to drink content from a fire hose, and so much of what we have to say, our ideas, our strategies, our marketing material just gets spilled on the floor. We're also dealing in an age where the consumer has seized power. This mobile phone is like a magic wand. Anything they want to conjure in the universe is within arm's reach of desire. They spend up to 1 in 7 days, and people say, how that's possible? Well, they can play, they can shop, they can peruse, they can validate, they can get likes. They can get information. They can take away your currency that you used to have, because you used to have a briefcase of knowledge. You had all the information. That's what made you important to them. But now they can bring all of that in. And the third thing we're dealing with in terms of attention is a lack of trust. We're seeing this growing divide in society. We're seeing this great divide where people aren't trusting each other anymore. We're not trusting our politicians. We're not trusting brands. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago we would sleep in strangers' beds? It's called Airbnb. We drive in strangers' cars, Uber. People hook up with strangers on the internet. The world has moved from the sense of being together to suddenly growing apart. And all of this, these headwinds, have changed our marketplace, and we've changed it permanently. There is no middle ground. There's no status quo. There's no place to hide. There's no hope that in the future things will get better. You have a choice to make as an individual. You have a choice to make if you own a firm. The choice is to either transform, make things happen, be relevant, or be a transaction. That's where the world's dividing, transformation and transaction. Nothing is surviving the middle. If you're in the transaction business, you will be disrupted. If you're just in the business of doing deals, papering deals, making sales, you will be disrupted because right now there's probably 10,000, if not 100,000 people trying to create apps to be faster, better, and cheaper than you. Because that's what a transaction is. It's about speed, it's about accuracy, and it's about lowering the cost. And they will come at you time and time again. However, and you'll see your commission. However, if you're in the business of this transaction, I can also tell you you're in the business of making a lot of excuses. I hear it all the time. I hear excuses in saying, in the restaurant industry, all the minimum wage has gone up, rent's getting expensive, food costs, bureaucracy. I'm sure in your world you're talking about fees and you're talking about government. These are the realities of doing business nowadays. I will not sugarcoat the message. If you stay in the transaction side and you live on the excuses side, you will become redundant. But if you find your way into the transformation side, if you find a way to change your business of doing business, and I'm sure many of you are already in this role, you have got such an incredible life ahead of you. See, the difference between in transformation is you're not going over a cliff trying to compete with machines. Your relevancy becomes yours because you focus instead on what you do to matters of the heart. You focus on what is really important to your client. I learned this about 12 years ago. I was sitting in an audience and there was this incredible speaker. And he talked about the need to get unplugged, just to clear his mind. And his way of doing it was hiking. He loved solo hiking without GPS. He just liked to find his way around things. And he was such a great teacher. He talked about putting on his boots and what it felt like to get out of the car on the pavement. They just felt awkward. And then as he started getting onto the beaten path, he could feel the gravel, and eventually he was one with nature. And he talked about this morning of being one of those mornings we love, where the temperatures, if you're in the sun, it warms you up and you want to delayer, and in the shade, it's just got that little bit of chill. And he's walking along, he's hearing nature, his mind's decluttering, and he's just feeling like he's finally won. And he turns the corner and he stumbles upon this rock quarry. This juxtaposition. He went from the perfect sounds of nature to looking and seeing half a mountain being defaced. People are running up and down looking like ants, the dust and the acid. But he has to get through it to get to where he has to go. So he's walking through it and he's kind of feeling awkward. He comes up to the first person and says, "What are you doing?" "I'm cutting rock." Goes up to the second person, asks the same question, gets the same answer. Goes to the third person. Woman, shining eyes, doing the exact same job. He asks the exact same question. And she says, "I'm part of a team building a great cathedral." Now, he took one of the oldest stories known. They've been telling this story for thousands of years. But it changed the way I approached business. I realized as a person in an advertising agency, I was doing a lot of things to get clients and consumers to buy my clients' products, but they weren't really buying in. They weren't part of something bigger. So I started looking and saying, what is the difference? Why would one person say I'm part of a great cathedral and be part of this transformation that was happening, while the other two were focused on transactions? And I realized it had to do with stories. Somebody had swept her away from the day in and day out, a pounding of rocks, and talked about what this cathedral would do, how it would unite a community. She had a seat at the table with the architects and the planners, the people carving the doors, making the stained glass windows. She was part of something bigger. She had purpose. So I said, is stories the answer? Is stories what can change the conversation? Take that fire hose and move it away and have people pay attention. Well, I started thinking about stories and how they draw you in, they fire emotions. Talk about the people in our life that are great storytellers. Stories are so powerful, they can actually change cultures. October 14th, 1948, 3 years after World War II, man had yet to fly at the speed of sound. And if I could take you back then, half this room, you didn't want it. That was God's territory. The planet would explode. The pilot wouldn't survive. But the other had an appetite for change, including this guy and the team. The right stuff. This is Chuck Yeager. Saturday morning, he gets out of bed and he says, this is our day. I want the game ball. Broken ribs, didn't matter. He took off, and this is what he said in his autobiography. I knew it was the day. I let that plane go, and I decided today it was her day to fly. And I just pointed it up, and I took in all the sights. And boy, did we fly. I kept looking down at the gauge and looking up, and then I heard what I've always dreamed to hear, the sonic boom. For the first time ever, man was flying at the speed of sound. But it was a perfectly paved speedway. A poke through Jell-O. Grandma could be sitting beside me sipping lemonade. Later, much later, I realized that those berries had never been in the sky, but always in our minds. They used that story for decades later, anytime NASA engineers said that can't be done. Are the barriers in the sky or in your mind? You know, stories are so powerful as a vehicle for communication, they actually can change your brainwaves. So let's say for a second that, what's your name? Brenda, let's say Brenda and I are really good friends. We get together every Saturday and we have coffee. And I walk in, Brenda says, oh, what'd you do last night? And I go, I had something to eat. Well, Brenda's incredible brain. Matter of fact, everybody in this room is incredible because you can decipher those words and know that I ate. But if I walked into that coffee shop, I said, Brenda, you remember last year we went to that bistro? Well, last night, coming home starving, I walked by and I said, I opened the door. The thing was just bursting with energy, man. This thing was just happening. The buzz. One chair left at the bar. I squeezed in there, and you know how much I love my craft beer. Well, it served little chips of ice on the top. Bartender said, what do you feel like eating? I said, I don't know, maybe a burger. He said, have you ever had beef bourguignon? I haven't had beef bourguignon since my grandmother made it. You got to try it. Brenda, ceramic dish, thick crust of bread, gravy that just was so beautiful and rich and brown, you know, the kind that you're not going to leave a drop. Chunks of meat that just melt in your mouth, the grilled mushrooms, these white onions that burst. When I tell you a story like that, a couple things happen. I fire your sensory cortex. You start relating to it because you've had gravy like that or meat like that, or you're interested in pottery and you imagine the dish. I fire your motor cortex and you come with me to the bar. I get you to leave your present and I get you to come with me. So I started looking at this and saying, well, stories is the answer. How do we work in sales to make stories work for us? So the first person I went to and I looked at was one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Steven Spielberg. Anybody remember this movie? Right? 41 years later, I've been to the beach 4,000 times. I still don't go in the water. Every time I see a paddleboard, I think that just is an appetizer out there for Jaws. It's true, though. But the thing about Jaws, I said, why does that work? Why do we remember it? And it works because every story that we fall in love with has a hero, a protagonist. And very often, if you're a great writer or a great storyteller, you just make the hero as normal as possible. This is Sheriff Brody. He hated being a big city cop, wanted to go to simple fishing village, watch his kids grow up, hand out a few parking tickets, tell people not to launch bonfires. That story would last about a minute, you get bored with Brody. Something has to happen in a story that makes the protagonist or the hero leave the normality. And this will come so clear in how it's going to help you with your business. So what happens is, there's a calling. There's a knock on the door. Gandalf shows up. Fairy godmother shows up. In this case, a shark shows up and takes down 2 tourists. So now he's got to go on a quest, and this is where stories get interesting. The challenges, overcoming obstacles, battling. When we talk about our life and our career, it's our quest that we remember and talk about. Well, you go on a quest, but a great story, you can't have Brody go on his own. You need helpers, enablers, mentors. In this case, you've got the marine biologist Hooper and one of the great characters of all time, Quint, who owns of the world. And then there's self-actualization, where you through somebody else's eyes, you learn something about yourself. So I looked at this concept and I said, does it work for brands? Is this the secret sauce that allows us to get attention and engage and shape how people think, feel, and behave? Can we possibly just be as simple as using this story arc, the hero going on a quest, helpers, and resolution with these basic needs? Can we put them together? Is that possible? Do we need a Steven Spielberg $100 million budget? Do we need the penmanship of a William Shakespeare? Or can the simplicity of this idea work in even 60 seconds?
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. And I would walk 500 more just to be with the world, 1,000 miles to fall down at your door.
Now, I'm still not sure how at dawn he changed the coffee for a Budweiser, and they got that through advertising standards. But think of this storyline. The hero's the dog. What a great life. Why would you ever want to change? Man's best friend, the Clydesdales is your buddies. Suddenly, the normality's shattered, gets lost. You go through a series of challenges, pouring rain, trying to find shelter. You're just at the point where the dog sees the farm, and then yet again, about to be eaten by the wolf, and the enablers come to the rescue. By the way, if you like that story, I watched Toy Story 3, where Woody gets abandoned and Lassie comes home, and thousands of others that have followed that exact same arc. But what I learned, and this is where it's all starting to come together for you, is that the great marketers and salespeople never make the hero in the story themselves. It's never about you. It's about me. That if they want your attention, they have to help the consumer to get to where they want to go. Is there any sports fans in this audience? Right? Can you imagine being a sports fan? You live in a small flat in Paris, but somehow or another you convinced people that you need room for your shrine, all your memorabilia. You've never missed a home game in 30 years. You can, if you get talking about it, you can recount every major moment in those 30 years. But you've never once had a chance to see your team play.
Bah non, il n'y a pas un matin où je me lève où j'y pense pas. Hein. Pour moi, le foot, le foot, c'est l'OM. Voilà. C'est en moi, c'est ma vie, c'est mon club, c'est dans mes tripes. Alors, ma femme et ma fille, elles se foutent souvent de moi, mais... Et depuis 30 ans, j'ai pas raté un match à domicile. Pas un. En même temps, j'en ai pas vu un seul. Et pourtant, je me souviens de tout. Hein. De tout. Le bruit de la tête de Basile Boli en 93 contre Paris. Les filets qui tremblent, le stade qui chavire, la joie des joueurs. Vous ne pouvez pas savoir ce que c'est d'être aussi près de vos idoles et de ne pas pouvoir les voir. Et puis un jour...
You know, we spend a lot of time in Canada talking about who has the fastest network. How many Gs have you got? How many screens you can play the content on? But these people changed the conversation and consideration because their network didn't matter until it mattered to me. You know, the thing that I want to impress on you today is it takes great humility and will to say, I'm not the hero. I'm there to help my client get to where they want to go. I'm going to put my eyes on what you do for a living. You know, I want to talk about how many houses I've sold and how successful I am and all the things that matter to me. I think the future and the transformation is saying, what can you do that matters most to where I'm heading in life? People talked about Steve Jobs as the great technologist. He hated technology. Couldn't stand technology. When he brought the iPod out, Sony Walkman owned portable music. How many people used to jog with a CD player on your hip? Remember that? And they had all the soundboards like you're like a DJ. When he brought out the iPod, he said, I don't want anything to do with technology. I want to make this so simple to use. And his promise to you was the most elegant advertising ever done. It was about 10,000 songs in your pocket and 10,000 songs in your pocket. His phone was, what's on your playlist? What are your apps? His technology helped to get to where you want to go. So, yeah, beer can do it, big cable companies. How about everyday products? Before we even get into sales. And how many people have vacuumed out here? We've all vacuumed, right? I hope we've vacuumed. So when you're vacuuming, is this not you and you're going along, you're vacuuming, maybe you're listening to music and then you catch something? What do? You kind of smile. Like, what did I catch? What did I suck up? So when the vacuum cleaner industry was asleep, Hoover owned it, Electrolux owned it. A guy called Dyson comes along, and he says, you know what? People actually enjoy vacuuming because they feel purposeful. They spend all their day punching keyboards and on their screens. They don't know what they're doing anymore. So why don't we let them see the dirt? And he created a clear canister. Multi-billionaire. Got into the fan business, got into every other business, but a simple insight, because instead of what mattered to him as engineering, he focused on what mattered to the consumer. Then I said, well, okay, I want to get as commodity as you can. I spent 30 years, Pepsi was a client. We hated Evian. Evian was like just the most pretentious brand. Glass bottle, sourced from the French Alps, everything was a French accent. But they got away with it for a while, and one day the consumer woke up and disrupted their business by saying it's just water. And Evian was smart enough and had the courage enough to stop talking about their glass and their source and instead focus on why water matters to you.
Here come the hot stepper. I'm the lyrical gangster. Big up the crew in the area. Still love you like that. No, we don't die. Yes, we multiply. Anyone press me, the fire they say. Act like you know we go. I know what don't know. Let's them up and go. Here come the hot stepper. I'm the lyrical gangster. Big up the crew in the area. Still love you like that. Here come the hot stepper. I'm the lyrical gangster. Excuse me, Mr.
So, focusing on the fountain of youth, was that engaging? Well, 250 million downloads. Apps where you could become the baby in the ad. Whole new strategy at retail, superbly executed, because they focused on what mattered most to the individual, hydration, versus what they thought was their reason for being, which is the fact it was a glass bottle. So does this work for sales? Before we get right into your industry, do you need production value? Do you need to be an engineer like Dyson to make it work? The interesting thing about it is it works better for sales than anywhere else. I'll give you two examples. I was working with the Holt Renfrew Group. For a while, they had a perfectly paced speed where there was no disruption. They were the luxury retailer. And a couple of things happened. First of all, our Canadian dollar for a short time strengthened in 2007 and became more expensive than it had more value than the American dollar. So all their customers could go down to New York now and shop without being punished with the currency. And then some of their biggest brands started setting up their own stores because they didn't like they weren't getting enough attention at Holt Renfrew. And then the internet came along. And Holt Renfrew started to almost go on life support. And we got involved in the organization, and I spent a lot of time observing their salespeople. Very often a customer would come in. First of all, if you weren't dressed the part, you rarely got served, but customers would come in and say, let's say, a woman would come up and say, I'm looking for a pair of skinny J brand jeans. And the person would look up and say, yeah, they're over there. Well, they're not over there anymore. They're right here on my phone. If you think that this transaction is easy, going to a store and going up an escalator when I can buy on this, you're mistaken. So I started working with them saying, why don't you just simply engage the customer and say, why, what's up? Well, I'm going skiing. Oh, Prairie Ski Party? Have I got an outfit for you? I could go in there and say, I had a great speech coming up, and I'm thinking of a pair of new flashy socks. What kind of speech? How many people? You got a few minutes? I want to show you a suit that's going to rock. We taught them how to sell into the customer's moments. We let them know that their role in the story was the fairy godmother. They didn't get to go to the ball. They just got to dress Cinderella. And the salespeople that transformed, their commissions didn't go up 8% or 15%. Some of them had 500 or 600% increases because instead of being in the transaction side and pointing to people like some kind of signpost, they spent what mattered most. That people, when they went out at night, when they went to the schoolyard, when they went to business meetings, they wanted to own the moment. Working with entrepreneurs. And at the end, I said, any questions? And one person stood up, very awkward and tall person. It's just weird. It was almost, surreal. And he said, I love your talk, Tony. I was just kind of smiling, glad he liked the talk. He said, but you can't help me. It's not really what you want, is a question. I said, what's up? He said, I'm in the custom front door business. I said, fantastic. He said, yeah, my grandfather started, hated carpentry, but really loved to create custom doors. And my dad took it over and scaled it up. We have a little plant with some contractors, some trucks. I said, fantastic. He said, well, my sister and I bought this business about 1.5 years ago, and I'm not sure we're going to make payroll in 4 months. I said, what's going on? He said, we're being disrupted. I said, well, how are you being disrupted? He said, well, they're bringing in doors from the overseas and selling them in Canada for cheaper than we can make them. I said, are they the same doors? And all of a sudden, the self-esteem, hell no. He actually dropped the F-bomb. Hell no. Solid oak, hand-mounted hinges, the best fixtures. So I stopped and I said, well, stop selling doors. And the audience was like, we paid this guy to come out. This is his family business. So you're not in the door business. You're not in the door business. If a customer comes in and every day they're reading and hearing about the crime in the neighborhood, you're in the drawbridge business. When you put your front door and they install it, nobody gets through it. Millennials come in and just bought their first home, deep in debt, but they're dreaming of what this house is going to be. I said, you're in the first impression business. They might not be able to afford all the renovations, but every time they walk through your door, every time they close, every time they invite anybody in, it's going to signal possibilities. See, in sales, it's not just showing people that you can help getting to where to go. It's becoming their Yoda. This is the advantage sales have in the storytelling. Because in advertising, we have to fabricate the mentor. In movies, we have to create the characters. But in the world of stories and real people, the Yoda factor, helping Luke Skywalker have the courage to defeat the evil empire, is the role you're going to play. So let's talk about your business of doing business in real estate. Let's talk about this concept of storytelling, this arc, and let's talk about these human needs. So, the hero. What knocks at the door? The quest, the mentor. The one thing I would say about your industry, I think a lot of you like to think you're the hero. I think a lot of you really like to position yourself. I see things like this all the time. I'm number one. I've done this. I've done that. I call this humble bragging. I call this ridiculous bragging. You don't, you have your pictures out there. I know, it's hard to believe. The hero in this story is the people buying or selling, residential or commercial. They are the heroes. They're the ones that are putting the chips on the table. They're the ones taking on the risk. They're the ones that might have borrowed for their family and friends. These people are true heroes for moving into real estate. Your job has got to be the Yoda. And I can't think of a better industry to be a Yoda, because you play against two of the most important things in life. My life. A house is a Trojan horse. It opens up possibilities. The reason we are here as humans is because we found a way to create nests. We found a way to take care of ourselves. We didn't have to be nomadic anymore and wander. We live in our houses, and to many people, we're going to retire because of our house. And the thing that you have to come to terms with, and this takes humility, this takes will, you just want to tell them how good you are, is you got to find out why. Each client is different. Each client is an individual. They're a person, they're a family, they're a unit. And you've got to start looking at these basic human needs and saying, how can I tap into what really matters to you? How can I help you transform your life and your livelihood versus facilitate a transaction? Look at safety, security, affordability. I mean, we're dealing in a world where we've got things like bully offers and bidding wars and go all in without inspection. And I'm putting everything on the line. And now when these machines start coming at content and fire hose, they're going to confuse people even more. There'll be way too much data to deal with. The first thing I got to say you've got to be is peace of mind. You're the veterans. You've been to battle. You know what the emotional at stake. You know how they're feeling, thinking, behaving. You're calming. You're going to let them sleep at night when they put their head on the pillow versus stare at the ceiling all night going, what have I done? Just think of some of the things that your clients ask you. The first thing is how many times they say, what's the crime in this neighborhood? Well, I'll tell you right now, you used to be able to pull out some great data and statistics. That's available. I could have given you 100 of those things I picked with just a simple Google search. That data doesn't matter. What matters is what does crime mean to the person you're dealing with? Crime is very different to a family that have young children. Crime is very different to elderly people. Crime's different based on whether you're single or married, your gender, your ethnicity, how long you've been in this country, your psychology. That's what crime is. It's not a statistic. It's not what happened last week. It's helping them find the peace of mind based on what they view to be risk. Think of all the other things that challenge you in the security of doing a deal. Infrastructure underneath our cities. Let's say I'm moving from the 905 to the 416, or the 416 out to the country. What are the things that are going to matter to me in making this massive transformation in my life? When we use words like downsizing, we're talking about downsizing. We're talking about a completely different world I'm moving into. Will I belong? Will I love it? Will I find happiness in it? I mean, this is everything. The flowers I put in front of my house, the way I put an awning in front of my store, that's me. That's not a building. That's not a mortgage. That's me. Thinking of the families that are going in there. Were they going to fit in? Are they going to love it? Is their family, their kids, the community? What's going to happen on Main Street? Think about things like purpose. You know, unless I'm flipping a house, this home, I'm going to see my children grow up in. I'm going to see my parents come and visit and get old. I'm going to be transformative. So everything matters. You know, people say, what's the schools like? I don't want you to just think of the schools based on these little kids now. What world are they going into, and what kind of education? And I want you to imagine these kids graduating and feeling happy and positive and with self-esteem based on the decisions you help them make. This new world of gig economy, what's going on? Because they want to be with like-minded people. Hotels are building lobbies now because people want to get together and connect. These WeWork are the future. It's not just because they're affordable, it's because how people are working today. Are you factoring that in when you look at it? And finally, the self-actualization. You know, I look at these transformative and this aging population and somebody moving into a condo. We want to free up some cash for their retirement or help the kids get a house. What if that client used to love to make jam or fix their motorcycles? What did they do in the past that made them love what they're doing, and how is that going to be altered? And how can you help them through that transformation? Are you going to find a place that's near a community garden? Is there a whole new adult education thing where that maker can get in and be part of it? Are they going to get involved in theater? Are they going to still have an ability to work with their hands, to present tomatoes to their friends and family and saying, I grew this? Are you going to be part of a community where people come together? Are you going to be part of a community where people can create and express and share? That is the business of doing business when you become part of the transformation economy. Now, we're coming near the end of our quest today. I'm about to say goodbye. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn's Tony Chapman Reactions, I publish a lot on transformation in different industries. But before I leave you, I want to leave you with one final story. It's a time of equally massive disruption. This one was more political. This led into the Second Great War. This is a young backbencher at the time, Winston Churchill. Out of favor by both political parties. The opposition couldn't stand him, and even his own party couldn't believe he would have the audacity to write articles for American magazines. You just didn't do that in the House of Lords. But Churchill was transformative. He saw what was happening with communism in Russia and the brown shirts starting to unite in Germany and fascism in Italy and Japan's thirst for oil and America becoming the new superpower. And Britain thought they could stay in the middle and status quo, and the Prime Minister just preferred debate and dialogue. Well, one day, Winston Churchill stood up in Parliament. He looked at everybody, and everybody looked at him. And then he looked at the Prime Minister and said, history will prove this honorable Prime Minister is wrong in these matters, for I and the people of England know it is so, because together we will write the history. And he took the battle on. He used storytelling and narrative. He made people believe. 3 years ago, he's recognized as the greatest Briton of all time. So what did we learn on our quest today? The first thing is the oxygen of all life, all human endeavor, all business endeavor is attention. When you have attention, you have the ability to be transformative. You have currency. The problem is there's headwinds. There's too much and too many chasing a finite amount of time. The consumer has command. They walk into the specialist medical offices saying, this is the prescription I need because I researched it on the web. We're dealing with a lack of trust where we're going, well, you're making all this money. Can I trust you? Which is just seeping sadly into human society. The middle has disappeared. There's no status quo. There's no hanging on. If you're in the transaction business, you will become irrelevant. They will put things faster, better, and cheaper than you. If you're in the transformation business, you will have something that no one machine can ever have. You will have heart. And heart is about empathy and caring and humility and will and listening and generosity and caring about those kids graduating and people sleeping with peace of mind and being able to still dig in the dirt when they make a transformative move or leave the city and fall in love with the country. When you have those kinds of conversations, you're relevant. When you have the time to pay attention to what matters most to me, you become so meaningful. There's no fire hose because you're helping me get to where I need to go. And one of the great Yoda quotes, one of the most important ones is, you have no choice. Make things happen or watch what happens. be transformative or lose your business and lose your commissions to transactions. Do or do not, there is no try. But if you have the courage, have the will, to stop worrying about being number one and all the deals and all the things that you've done, and instead focus on what matters most to me. Instead of telling your story, you become part of my story. I promise you, you will write the history, because those that tell the stories, well, they rule the world. Thank you. Thank you.